Good evening to you, Mark Sutt of HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for the 22nd day of April, 2019. Happy Earth Day to you. That's a hotel room. I'm in a hotel room on my way back to Mexico Beach, going there tomorrow to film some final scenes for my upcoming documentary, which I will talk about in more detail next Monday. I am about 90% finished. I just have to put the finishing touches on a few things, and it will be complete. And I will tell you, it is magnificent. Definitely the best work of my career. I'm also going to go from there, Mexico Beach and vicinity, to New Orleans. I'll be in Slidell, Louisiana tomorrow night, and then on to New Orleans on Wednesday, where I am receiving an award from the National Hurricane Conference, Outstanding Achievement Award. And I picked that up during the luncheon, the awards ceremony, etc. on Wednesday afternoon. So, all right. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm in a hotel room. And that's why this video discussion for this week is being recorded at almost 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So I've been traveling all day. All right, let's get rid of me, or at least the image of me, for now, and take a look at this. This is the news that came out last week. Everybody probably knows about this that's followed my videos, etc. This was all over the web and national news that Michael officially upgraded to 160 mile per hour, Category 5, the fourth such landfall in United States history. And what makes this so extremely incredible from our point of view is the fact that we had a camera system set up right there in that right front quadrant of a Category 5 hurricane in Mexico Beach. And you've probably seen the footage already, a few minutes of it anyway, on my YouTube channel. It should be in the top videos. I finally figured out how to manipulate all that and move it up to where it should be so that people can easily find it. But that's where we had one of the cameras. Of course, we had another camera sitting down here and another one farther over in East Point, and then one over off the map in St. Mark's. And then, of course, the team and we were over in the Panama City area with more cameras, handheld cameras, even a GoPro put in the windowsill. Wait till you see all this in the documentary. It's going to be incredible. But yeah, this is the landfall satellite animation, and you can just imagine, technology did the work. It captured some amazing, very helpful as well, video of what's happened with Michael. And we'll talk about this towards the end of today's discussion. I'll show you a screen grab of a little bit about what I'm doing tomorrow in Mexico Beach. Real quick, how do they do this, by the way? Why is it 6+ months later and now it's a Category 5? Well, operationally, there's a lot of things going on, and without just an incredible network, let's just pretend, what if we had wind observations all through here with hardened structures that could withstand Cat 5 conditions? I'm just trying to draw this in. Let's just pretend that we had wind readings from land-based instruments all over the place here. Dozens of them, whatever. We don't. Okay? We just don't. So let's just pretend that was where all the wind sensors were. 10-meter towers, hardened, they can't get knocked over, whatever. In a perfect world, this could have helped us to determine that this was a Category 5 as it was happening, perhaps. But that's over land. What about when this eye was coming in and it was still over the water, over here? Well, that's where the recon, via either the Air Force plane or the NOAA plane, the Department of Commerce P3, those also flying around over the ocean, they're trying to sample the data as this comes in. But those are just tiny planes in the scheme of things, and they're not always going to find the strongest part necessarily. Because as we see the animation here, look how everything changes. It's always changing. It's radiating out in the upper levels of the atmosphere, all of the exhaust that's coming in at the surface. That cyclonic inflow at the surface, outflow at the top, and every single minute it is changing. And so having planes in there, you'd need, a lot of them, and that's probably very difficult to coordinate. So it takes a while to look at the data that was compiled both from land and via aircraft to make a determination on exactly what the best estimate, and you see that right there, estimate, the estimated intensity at landfall was 160 miles per hour. Could have been higher, could have been lower. It's, nobody will know for absolute certain because there's just not enough instrumentation out there. But this is the best estimate by the scientists at the National Hurricane Center, and I think it makes sense because Michael was intensifying all the way up to landfall. The eye was contracting, the pressure was falling. It was not one of these hurricanes that was weakening on the way to the coast. It was intensifying, and so just following the logic of the aircraft data, which showed 152 knots at flight level, and the pressure dropping to at least 919 millibars down all day. The whole time it was coming in, it was strengthening. Why not that last 15 to 30, maybe 45 minutes as it made landfall? Wouldn't it have kept strengthening? I mean, look at the satellite presentation right at landfall there. Come on, it's a no-brainer that it is a 160 mile per hour Cat 5. I believe it. I think it makes sense, especially considering what we do know from the data that we do have from the different agencies that were out there, and land-based and air-based. All right, so that's a little teaser as to what I'm going to talk about at the end of the discussion. Okay, so the INSO, let me bring me back just for a moment. I talk a lot about this El Nino Southern Oscillation stuff because it is a precursor usually as to what the hurricane season may or may not be like in terms of the amount of storms that form, hurricanes, of course, and the quality of them. Are they going to be intense? Are we going to have a favorable Atlantic? And if so, why? Why would it be favorable? Or looking at it the other way, why wouldn't it be favorable? Another way to say it is unfavorable. Why would it be unfavorable? Well, El Nino is a big player in this, and the more amplified or robust an El Nino is, the abnormal warming of the Pacific along the equatorial region, then the more adverse the upper level winds are, typically with wind shear coming across as well as sinking air. Remember, hurricanes like rising air, when the air is sinking, that is subsidence. And hurricanes don't like that. They need divergence in the atmosphere. The air is rising, convection, and El Nino helps to sort of squash that. And in some cases, it's not sort of at all. It absolutely helps to squash that. So our good friends at the Bureau of Meteorology down there in Australia, I love this. This is a great summary, and I'll read it as quickly as I can for you. Short-lived El Nino remains likely. I like the way that they put this. It says short-lived. All right, so it's not looking like one of these big-time El Ninos, and they're not even saying that we're in an El Nino. The U.S.-based Climate Prediction Center and NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, says that we're in an El Nino, a very weak one. Nevertheless, the Bureau's, and this is again the Bureau of Meteorology Australia, the Bureau's INSO outlook remains at El Nino alert. This means the chance of El Nino developing in the coming months is approximately 70%, around triple the normal likelihood. Although sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific Ocean are still close to El Nino thresholds, and this is an important piece right here, the atmosphere is yet to show a consistent El Nino-like response. And this is what I show you each week when we talk about this stuff. The Southern Oscillation Index, which typically drops, you hear me talk about this, negative. When an El Nino pressure pattern develops across the equatorial Pacific, remains neutral generally, and trade winds are currently close to normal strength near the equator. Now this was issued, 8 days ago now? And the next update is coming up here in just a few more days. Nevertheless, what they are saying in this latest update here from the 16th is that, we're really not quite to El Nino yet. And the atmosphere and the ocean haven't coupled so that it really gets going. It's just not quite there yet. And you can look at some of these things, like look at the subsurface here. This is one representation of it. There's another one over here that I'll show you. We'll get back to that in a second. And just look down here at this. Let's see if I can pull this up separately. I sure can. So look, this is the surface right here, and that's where all that warmth is. Well, it's close to the surface, about 100 meters deep, and up from there. But look, below that warm pool is this very large area of neutral, and then a degree Celsius below average, according to this particular data set right here. It's hard to draw with this mouse. My arrows aren't too well constructed today. This is just a different way of looking at it. One day I'm going to thoroughly research this. Why do we have different ways of looking at the same thing? But this is a larger and more or less similar way, right? You see the subsurface there, but there's just more in this one. This was updated on the 14th. This was updated on the 18th. But the bottom line, this large pool of warmth is being eroded, and it's very steady, and there's no more warm, one of these warm subsurface blobs, if you will, coming from the Western Pacific. This is the Western Pacific on this side. This is the Eastern Pacific over here on the right-hand side. And generally speaking, when you have a very negative SOI and strong westerly winds blowing across the surface of the Earth here, the equatorial region, I say strong compared to average, you drive a lot of this warm water in the Western Pacific downward in what's called a downward Kelvin wave, and that gradually moves its way east. The relaxed trade winds allow that water to surface, spread out, and become El Nino-like. Well, we had that January, February, into parts of March, but then it got cut off. The Southern Oscillation Index began to rise, and the pressure pattern changed, and now things are different. And we'll show you that in just a moment. I have some very interesting a forecast to show you here in just a moment. So what does it look like at the surface? All right. So again, we'll try to bring me back. The surface temperatures, you have departures from normal. Those are called anomalies, either positive or negative anomalies. And on this map, the positive anomalies are in the yellows and oranges and reds, etc. I mean, you already know this. And the negative anomalies, of course, are in the blues down to dark blue and dark purple. Well, if we look at the equatorial Pacific region, all through here, generally speaking, it's about a half a degree Celsius to almost a full degree Celsius above the long-term average, depending on what data set you look at. You know what? We can be real liberal with it and just call it a degree Celsius. We'll go to the high side. Fine. It's about a degree Celsius above the long-term average. And that's, getting it. That's a weak El Nino. It's a steady El Nino. It's there, at least according to the U.S. Government Climate Prediction Center, as I mentioned. But it is starting to wane ever so slightly and ever so steadily. Meanwhile, the Atlantic Basin, generally where it should be, especially down in the deep tropics, there are no areas of major departures from normal except down here tailing off the southwest coast of Africa. That's pretty warm compared to average, and we'll have to see how that affects the West African monsoon and those tropical waves that start to get going later in the spring and the summer, and of course the very, very early fall months. So this is the surface, okay, again, this is the area that we're watching for the El Nino, and I expect that we'll start to see this area cool in the coming days and weeks, and I have evidence to back that up. I'll show you in just a moment. So real quick, average, let's slow down, Mark. Actual, that's the word I'm looking for. Actual sea surface temperatures, Gulf of Mexico, continuing to warm as you would imagine. Of course it will. I just like watching the thing progress. It's very interesting to me. The gradient, the temperature spread over distance is not tremendous, and so the colors are much more wide in their fill, if you will. You know what I mean? They're not all crunched together like you see off the Atlantic seaboard and New Orleans, sitting right up here at 30, 90. Water temperatures offshore in the Gulf, 20, 21, 22 Celsius, something like that, steadily warming up. And you can bet probably even by May 1st, not that long from now, most of the northern Gulf Coast will be in the mid-70s Fahrenheit. Off the Atlantic, like I mentioned, that temperature gradient stronger, so you get this sort of gradation here, this coloring, because you've got very, very warm water relative to the cold water up here. Gulf Stream embedded in there. Water temperatures at least 68, almost 70 degrees south of this line, and then, 40s, 50s, and 30s north of that line. So that is a pretty steep gradient of temperature over distance. And just a little bit of that 26 Celsius coming in there. Again, no major discrepancies from normal, no big departures from normal. We can see that on the anomalies map. A little bit warmer than it should be in the Northwest Atlantic, but it's been that way for several years, so no shocker there. All right, this is what I was alluding to, some changes coming up. Tyler Stanfield, who is that, you may ask? Well, I thought you could mouse over this and it would tell me. Come on. It's not going to. Let's see if I scroll up, if it'll do it. Oh, that's okay. He is at University of Oklahoma. Smart kid, put it that way. We'll just leave it at that. And so I like to follow what he shows because he's, again, somebody, maybe this one will, nah, it's all right. When I'm done, I'm going to click on his name and I'll show you what he does. I mean, heck, he's working hard. Might as well give him the credit that's due. So I follow him because he talks about stuff that's interesting to me. And he's posted this zonal wind pattern over the next couple of weeks or so. What is that? It's the past few days and then a few days out, so not quite a couple of weeks. But what he's saying is that the winds at about 5,000 feet showed a basin-wide enhancement of the trades. And let me just click on this and isolate it, and I'll kind of explain what this is. Let's get a green color since that's not being used in the color bar. All right, so this is 60 degrees west longitude. This is all the way back over to 0, so it spans a good deal of the globe. And we are looking at time in the vertical here. So this is distance across the globe and longitude on the horizontal, time on the vertical. This is all the past, all right? And this is the beginning of the GFS operational forecast. And so this area is all in the future down here. This is what's coming, supposedly, in the forecast. What does it mean? Well, generally speaking, all of this blue in here are enhanced trade winds, anomalously so, more than the normal. That's what anomalies means right there. You can see that. 850 millibars, about 5,000 feet up. So this means that this area over here, let's try to get this back. Ta-da! The trade winds should start blowing from about this area on well across the Pacific here faster than average. A easterly wind burst. And the GFS is predicting that. I think the Euro, he didn't show the Euro EPS, which is the Ensemble Prediction System version of this, but generally speaking, trades for days, as people say, all across from, even the Atlantic Basin to some extent, but more so here in the Pacific. And that, my friends, will more than likely, you never say for sure with the weather, right? Put an even bigger dent in this right here and prevent another westerly wind burst from happening. And this El Nino, as Tyler mentions here, we'll go back now and look at his original tweet. As he mentions, well, here we go. He's an OU meteorology student, and his undergraduate research is in tropical weather and climate teleconnections. Picture of the young lad right there. So scroll down again and just look at what he was saying right here. Sorry. His conclusion makes a lot of sense, that this would likely inhibit further warming of ENSO as we move into May and could be a signal of the approaching demise of El Nino this summer. Could be. He's not saying it will. I'm not saying it will. But this is interesting to see because if it comes to fruition, this chart, the El Nino will have another big chunk, if you will, taken out of its progress. All right? All right, enough of the tropics for now. I covered a lot. Some of it's technical. I hope you were able to follow along. Lower 48 weather. We're in the heart of severe weather season. Winter season's pretty much gone, for the most part. So part of my job is to keep you aware of any big-ticket severe weather outbreaks. I'm not really a big severe weather expert. I leave that up to other people, but at least bringing it to your attention is part of what I do. So if we look at the GFS, the Global Forecast System, over the next several days. You can clearly see down here, hopefully, as clear as at least I can make it, that this is from Levi Cowan's site, tropicaltidbits.com. Some fairly heavy rainfall in central Texas over the next several days. That moves through eastern Texas into southwest Louisiana by Thursday morning, and then that low pressure area and all the rain, etc., moves east, which is good because we got to keep this forest down here where Michael, devastated billions of board feet or whatever it is of pine trees and other trees. Got to keep it wet so that new growth can come back. That's a tinderbox waiting to happen if we ever get into drought conditions in the path of where Michael came through, right through this area up into southwest Georgia. Got to keep that moist. So every time we get one of these frontal passages and rainfall, take it. Anyhow, this progresses and another storm system cuts through South Dakota into Minnesota by about day 5. And then as we get towards the end of the month, end of April and into early May, got to start watching these areas of low pressure that come in, and this southwesterly flow and the wind coming around the surface here from the Bermuda High, sitting well offshore. Yeah, severe weather could be an issue at the end of April and into early May. You see another storm system developing, comes through Kansas. Something to watch. Kansas up through Iowa and into perhaps Minnesota, Wisconsin from there. Now we're into early May. Height of the severe weather season should begin. Whether or not it's active below or above normal, we'll have to wait and see. But there you go. At least there's less and less. Look at that. What is that? May 7th? And there's these blues, and that's snow, frozen precip in parts of the Appalachians. Go away, winter. We don't need you anymore. Just a real quick look at the convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. This is day 1. All right, so this basically covers through today. And it's interesting, you see in the east, high pressure generally in control now, and the storm track is going to basically be like this over the next few days. And that's going to keep the nation's midsection in that severe potential, but nothing crazy, not even an enhanced or a moderate or anything coming up, which is good. But you do see this constant rain and severe weather threat in parts of Texas, and so you got to pay attention to the potential, especially in the hill country, for possible flooding. So whoever you follow in that region, keep up with them, and they'll tell you all about it. Again, my job, I'm just trying to point it out to you. We've got a lot going on in the world with geopolitical distractions, right? That the weather, you don't need that swimming up and biting you in the rear, and you can't say you didn't know about it. I want to at least draw your attention to it. Okie doke. So this is an iconic, it's getting dark outside, an iconic picture for me. This is just a few minutes after Brent Lynn. He's one of the folks that's on Patreon, and he came up from the Virgin Islands. Talk about crowdfunding. Not only is he a patron, but he said, I'm going to come help you. So he started helping during Florence, flew up from the Virgin Islands and came back for Michael. And this is the shot when we set up the GoPro camera in Mexico Beach. And we now know, of course, this has all changed, obviously for the worse. And Michael came in, as I mentioned, as a Category 5, and this is where the camera was located. Right there is Toucans of Mexico Beach. Was Toucans. This is gone, of course. This went across the street and down the other street. It's all wrecked, and I'm going to be back there tomorrow, and I'm going to try to recreate this shot. I brought my GoPro back with me. Hopefully, the utility pole that this camera system was mounted on is still there, and it hasn't been like moved over this way or anything by bulldozers and whatnot. If it's still there, then I'm going to try to set up the GoPro and try to match this shot. I've got a printout of this picture that I brought with me, and we're going to do sort of this before and then a long dissolve into after. And then that helps to sort of end the Michael chapter and bring it in to the whole documentary covering the 2018 season. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to also do a couple of other things that I'm not going to tell you about because they're secret, because they're going to be awesome. Very, very interesting and helpful for people to understand not only what Michael did, but how it did it. That's very important to me. And I'm going to go back to Mexico Beach tomorrow and work on capturing some of that to help round out the story of the 2018 season that included, as I mentioned at the top of the discussion here, now posthumously upgraded, as they call it, Category 5 Hurricane Michael. All right, that is it from me. It's dark outside just about, so I guess I've been rambling on for quite a while. It got dark. That's what happens when you do this thing. I started about 17 minutes ago, something like that. That's what happens when you do these in the evening. Nevertheless, I'm finished. It's out of the way, and hopefully you learned something from it. I'll be back next week, of course, with more. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, in Lake City, Florida. I guess I should have said that earlier. That's where I am tonight. Again, tomorrow to Mexico Beach, and then Wednesday in New Orleans at the National Hurricane Conference for the awards ceremony, and then back home from there to finish the documentary. Next Monday, I will talk a lot more about it, and we'll go from there. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you very much. Let's see if I can get the button to work to get rid of me. There we go. Have a good rest of your week. We'll talk again early next week.